Why do some Americans, and some very powerful Americans, not want to think of Washington as a slave owner?
It shakes the very foundation of American history. If there were ever a man-god in American history, it's George Washington. George Washington is the foundation of what America represents. So if you find out that at the very core, at the very foundation, this man had such a horrific blemish, that blemish being slavery, people don't want to admit the truth. If he's flawed, then America's flawed.
How did George Washington treat his slaves?
Well, any person who enslaves any other person automatically treats them bad by enslaving them. That's the first thing. But even beyond that, George Washington was a miserable miser when it came to his enslaved population. He was notorious for having them run around in rags, having them hungry, having them emaciated. In 1780, there was something called the Pennsylvania Gradual Abolition Act. They passed a law saying, hey, if you bring enslaved human beings into this state and you hold them for 6 straight months, at the end of that 6-month period, they could petition for their freedom.
Yes.
So what George Washington would do is wait for 5 months, 29 days, take them across state lines, and then bring them back. Now, people say, well, yeah, he kind of skirted the law. No, he didn't just skirt the law, he broke the law.
Nobody wants to hear that about our great hero, George Washington,
Absolutely.
do they? Oh, my goodness.
And you know, it's so funny because if you want to say George Washington was a great general, you can say that. If you want to say George Washington was a great president, you can say that. But can you be a great human being when you hold 316 fellow human beings in brutal bondage and play the type of games he did with Pennsylvania's Gradual Abolition Act?
Why is it important to tell this story about George Washington, slave owner?
It's important in order for America and ultimately the world to be able to move toward racial healing. We might not ever reach that kumbaya moment where we all come together as a human species, but at least we can begin to respect one another. And you respect people when you find out where they came from, what they're about. In order to reach the truth, you have to tell the truth. And you have to tell the truth at the beginning. The beginning of American political history is George Washington. You got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The history of the American Revolution has been mythologized, distorted, reimagined, and sometimes just made up.